What's up guys, it's Jacko, welcome to the channel. Today we're looking at a video by Once Faded called It's Impossible to Survive in Australia in 2025. The original video will be linked in the description below. Make sure you hit the comments, let me know what you think, if you agree, disagree with what I'm saying. This channel is all about challenging my own beliefs, educating myself, educating others, and just trying to navigate these wild times that we're living in at the moment. So let's get into it.
Australia has always been seen as this lucky country, but more and more it doesn't really feel like that anymore. It honestly kind of feels like a boiling pot right now, and I'm not here to whinge, and I'm not here to try and start some outrage campaign. I just want to talk about how real people are living and how it's getting.
The lucky country thing is pretty interesting to dive into. The fact that it was a book written in the 60s that was a critique about Australia, and it basically argued that rather than being genuinely successful through skill, planning, or good political leadership, Australia was basically coasting by on its natural advantages, being resources, farmland, our climate and our favorable geography. And bear in mind, this was written in the 60s. Um, and you fast forward to today, and we still have a severe over-reliance on resource extraction. We haven't developed any kind of advanced manufacturing or diversified into other industries that I'm aware of. Um, our economic complexity is declining year over year. I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that we were lower than Bangladesh for economic complexity. I mean, so I don't know what our politicians have been doing for the last 60 years, but there hasn't really seemed to be any long-term strategic planning or any effort to diversify. And we've kind of been okay so far. I think, globalization, we all kind of share and trade with each other, and that's allowed us to get by just pumping out rocks from the ground and importing the things we need. But it definitely feels like, with global tensions rising and the kind of shifting geopolitical landscape that's we're seeing out there today, I think Australia is pretty vulnerable economically, and our economy is very weak, and that trickles down into everyone's everyday life. So maybe that's what we're kind of starting to feel now.
Getting harder, not easier, because lately it's been feeling like we're being left behind. And when I say we, I mean the regular person. So let me just start with the part that really sets the tone for everything I'm talking about, and that's income. What people actually take home, not just the number on your payslip. I'm talking about what that number actually buys you in 2025, because that's where the whole thing starts to fall apart. Recently, we actually broke a record, and not the kind that you're going to see on a tourism campaign. Australia has had the biggest drop in real household disposable income in the developed world. So pretty much the average Australian weekly pay is worth less because everything else is so expensive. Like, let that sink in. Out of all the advanced.
Yeah, we've had the worst collapse in living standards since the 50s, and the worst in the OECD since 2022. I think we've probably been in a recession for the last 2 years. Um, I think the CPI is highly manipulated and inflation's running much hotter than we're being told. And like I said before, our economy is so weak. We've had literally zero productivity growth since 2016. Our GDP has a one handle on it, so we're not able to grow our way out of this inflationary hole caused by the COVID policies, even though it's been 4 to 5 years post COVID. We're just mass immigrating low skilled people to create fake growth without the infrastructure to support the population. And I'm not seeing any solutions or strategies in the works or on the horizon other than just record government spending deficits to tape over the cracks and pumping in migrants to boost tax revenue. That's it.
Economies, we've gone backwards the most, which shouldn't be the case for any advanced economy. Since 2022, real household income in Australia has fallen by 8%, not because everyone's suddenly working less, but it's just because the cost of everything else went up and our wages didn't. Like, that's what people mean when they say real wages are falling. Your pay might be going up on paper, but you're still poorer than you were 2 years ago. For instance, if someone earns 100K in 2025, they're technically only earning $92,000 if you compare that to the same wage in 2022. Meanwhile, countries like the US, real incomes are up 8.6, Canada's up 5.5, Like, Australia was one of the only developed worlds to go backwards, and that 8% loss isn't just a number on a spreadsheet.
I'd like to know what you guys think. Why have we not bounced back? Why have we not had real wage growth and other countries have um, since since the start of this kind of inflationary period after COVID?
It's a pressure that builds up in your everyday life, and it's what makes you double check your bank balance before saying yes to going out to dinner or anything like that. And this stat is so ridiculous because for a while, my rent alone was eating up a massive chunk of my income. It kind of felt like I was just working to survive, and that's not some dramatic exaggeration. That's just the reality for a growing chunk of people, even full-time workers, even people doing, quote, everything right. All of them are still struggling. Like, I'm honestly just trying to live somewhere comfortable. That's literally all I'm asking for. But housing in Australia is completely detached from reality. We have one of the highest house price to income ratios in the world. So I didn't know what that meant either until I looked into it. But pretty much that just means that the average Australian household income is way less than the price of the property they are living in. And when the average house price is pushing $1 million, it makes complete sense why Australia has the biggest house price to income ratio. You basically need a six-figure.
Yeah, it's never been harder to buy a house in Australia, and we've all heard the stats around housing affordability, but what really highlights it for me is when you just think back 24, 25 years ago, and I'll use my parents as an example, not very financially savvy, just kind of go with the flow, laid back Aussies, just did the classic, finished school, got degrees, traveled for a few years, just worked a normal job, nothing fancy. And when it was time, decided to settle down, start a family, bought a house. It was, roughly 200K with, 150K of mortgage debt. And, they've been able to live a really comfortable life. And now, just 25 years later, that reality is pretty much gone. The idea that you can just, you know, wake up one day and decide it's time to settle down and get into home ownership, it doesn't exist anymore. If you decide today that you want to own a home, you're going to have to plan ahead and sacrifice for years just to get that deposit, not to mention the reality of saving that deposit when rent is 50% or more of your total income. And when you do buy a house, you're signing up for a crippling level of debt and interest repayments for the next 30 years. And those repayments, they're like a leech on your back for the next 30 years. I did the maths on this recently because I'm trying to buy a home at the moment. And if I took my kind of projected interest payments and invested them at a very modest 7% compounding growth, I'd be a multimillionaire in under 10 years. But instead, because house prices are so high and you need a giant mortgage to break into the market, that money's being eaten up paying interest over a 30-year loan. And they say Australia's one of the richest nations in the world, but it's all based on house prices, which are, unless you own your property outright, it's mostly debt. It's mostly debt-based wealth. So I just think real wealth would be lower house prices, meaning you pay off your mortgage sooner and you can actually start investing your income into productive assets in the economy. And you can actually start to save and invest for retirement, so then you don't have to rely on a government pension, but instead the opportunity cost of an entire nation crippled with mortgage debt and the amount of people's incomes that's just flowing down the drain instead of into the broader economy and more productive things. That's interesting to think about in the context of what we were talking about before with Australia's kind of economy being weak. Maybe if so much of our wealth wasn't tied up into real estate and was actually able to go into investing into businesses and productive things in the economy, maybe things would be different. But it's something to think about. But I don't want this video to go for too long, so I'm going to call it there. Make sure you hit the comments. Let me know your thoughts. I'll be down there checking it out. And I'll see you in the next one.